So the Static Shock series has finally made a comeback after being gone for years since it was tied up in lawsuits. If you want to know more about it, then I actually have a video dedicated to talking about what happened to the series. But yeah, Static is back. He has a new comic book series, a live-action movie in the works. What could possibly go wrong? The internet. The internet happened. Static is one of the most beloved superheroes of all time, so why are people suddenly up in arms after spending years demanding his return? Well, when the Static Reboot comic came out, it was revealed that he got his powers from a Black Lives Matter protest. And now, all your usual people are mad because Static is, quote, too political and too woke. Guys, I don't know if you know this, but Static, his original comic, the cartoon, and Milestone comics as a whole have always been political. That's like the entire point. Like, what did you guys think his origin story was? From everything that I've read and watched, Static and most of the characters in Milestone Comics got their powers from the Big Bang, a meetup between rival gangs that was raided by the police, who fired an experimental tear gas that was laced with a radioactive tracking agent that was meant to mark everyone there. This excessive force and police carelessness led to a lot of problems, the most notably of which was mutating a ton of victims and giving them powers. Some people like Vydal were lucky with their abilities, being more or less the same but now with zappy zap hands. Others ended up like Brick House, a girl that was fused with a brick wall. So why was Vydal there? I mean, he's not in a gang. Well, that's because Vydal was violently bullied at school on a regular basis and got his hands on a gun that he was going to use to shoot his tormentor. So yeah, I don't know how anyone can look at the issues of gang violence, police brutality, government tracking, and gun violence all within the first issue and first episode of the show and come to the conclusion that the Static series isn't political. In the reboot, Vydal and several other student activists were peacefully protesting the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but were met with violent counter-protesters, and the police came in to fire the aforementioned experimental tear gas to break them up. Lots of people have been taken to Twitter to talk about how Static's original creators would have been appalled to see how their creation is being used to talk about modern day politics, even though that's always what Static has done. I mean, yes, the face of the company, Dwayne McDuffie, did pass away, but the other Milestone founders are alive, well, and directly involved with the reboot. From creator Dennis Cohen, quote, "We felt it was very necessary to tell stories that are relevant for today. Black people are being murdered. That's not something we're going to sit back and not say anything about. We're going to speak about what's important to us." Maybe I'm just a little naive, but I feel like it's a dumb move to tell the creator of Static that he doesn't understand his own character. Now, personally, as a longtime fan of both the Static comic and cartoon, I do actually wish the reboot stuck with the gang warfare angle. But at the same time, it makes total sense that Milestone wanted to update their characters to better reflect the modern era. But let's be entirely honest. Even if they stuck with the original origin story, there would still be a massive outcry from people about the series being too political. We have seen it time and time again with these people who think that political messaging in comic books is sacrilegious, even though politics have always been a part of them. I can't tell you how many times that a character of color comes onto the scene, and then you get dozens of comments about how Stan Lee is rolling in his grave, despite the fact that Stan Lee was extremely pro-diversity and vocal about it too. Even outside of diversity, though, there are countless instances of superheroes getting political, from Superman becoming friends with JFK, the entirety of the X-Men, the right-wing versus left-wing road trip of Green Lantern and Green Arrow, Captain America renouncing the United States after the Watergate scandal, and so much more. But Milestone Comics especially was a company that had politics baked into every aspect of their publications, being created for the sole purpose of giving more diverse representation in mainstream superhero comics, and constantly featuring and discussing the modern problems that the country was facing at the time, and which in many cases still persist to this day. I mean, hell, the first book that the company published was Hardware, which opens with the titular hero literally being a black man shattering a glass ceiling. They were not subtle about it in the slightest. Static, being the most high-profile and successful book that Milestone had put out, was no stranger to handling these difficult and timely issues as well. Like, what about the LGBT protests, where the police are extremely candid about what they think of them? Or how about the 3-issue arc of Static having to de-escalate racial tension, which literally opens with Static thinking to himself, "Okay, Vydal, how do you stop a race riot fast?" Not political, right? That same arc also dealt with Vydal himself having racist anti-Semitic beliefs, which get challenged, causing him to self-reflect and grow as a person. Similar beliefs were challenged in the series when tackling racism, making it explicitly clear that you don't have to be a racist to benefit from racism, that you can be the most squeaky clean, non-racist white man on the planet, but if you work at a place that discriminates against black people, then you are benefiting from the unequal treatment through no fault of your own. The problem is systemic. Now, there are plenty of examples from the comics that I can go on and on and on about, but I know that most y'all don't really care and haven't read them. When it comes to Static, there is no denying that the cartoon series Static Shock is the most well-known and influential depiction of the character. And guess what? It was political too. So obviously it has the same police brutality origin story, but Static Shock handled all sorts of political issues. Besides the fact that Vydal's dad is a community organizer and how since most of the bad guys are gang members, they inherently come from backgrounds of poverty and or abuse, there are dedicated episodes like Sons of the Father, which tackles racism.
And now I see why Richie acts like a hood, Maggie. That kid's a bad influence. All his kind are.
Well, you got what you wanted, Dad. My best friend's gone because of you and your stupid racism.
Richie always goes on and on about Virgil and his cool dad, but he never even told me you were...
African-American? Would that have made a difference to you, Foley? Or should it have? No, you were talking about his kind, that's all. Well, I know your kind, Foley. I've seen your kind all my life. A fine, upstanding bigot. His nose so close to the grindstone he can't see anything else. Meanwhile, the world changes and grows, and he's blind to it. Ignorant. And proud of that, too.
There's the episode Jimmy that's all about a school shooting, and how about the episode Flashback, which opens with explicit gang riots and whose entire plot is about going back in time to prevent them, while also saving Virgil's mom in the process, who was killed by a stray bullet during these riots. The episode Frozen Out is all about teenage homelessness, mental illness, and how the two of them can be directly connected. Then there's the episode Static in Africa, which is about, well, static in Africa, and directly explains Pan-Africanism.
Pan-Africanism is the belief in the unity of all black people and their cultural connection to Africa.
Virgil talks about how in Africa he doesn't feel like an outsider.
I've been carrying this weight around all my life without knowing it, and now it's gone.
What are you talking about, Virg?
In Africa, I'm not a black kid. I'm just a kid. I mean, is this what it feels like for you all the time?
Yeah, I guess.
And he talks about the importance of black superheroes.
A black superhero. I don't know, it validates me somehow.
Heroes come in every color, my friend.
I know. It's just that sometimes I wish there was a black superhero back home for folks to look up to.
Oh, but there is.
But sure, go off about how the show wasn't political. Okay, so let me get on my soapbox here for a second, as if I wasn't already on one. Though, in this case, it's actually my roommate's unopened box of Axe body wash. Does the metaphor still track? So this is the part of the video where things are going to get a little controversial. See, everything I said in the video earlier, outside of that brief aside how I mentioned that I would prefer if these Static reboots stuck to the original origin story, were indisputable facts. Now, what I'm about to tell you are also facts, but these are ones that tend to get people really worked up, and they refuse to understand them. If your issue with the reboot of Static is him getting involved with Black Lives Matter, then it is important to remember that BLM is not an organized group. It is a decentralized movement that started in the wake of several murders of black people, especially as a result of police brutality. BLM is strictly about how black lives do in fact matter. They don't matter more than others, there is just a disproportionate amount of police brutality and murder of black people. When you go to the doctor with a broken arm, the doctor doesn't tell you to get over it because all bones matter. They treat the broken arm. Now, are there bad actors that use peaceful protests as an excuse to cause mayhem? Yes. But if anyone is going to demonize an entire movement because of a few edge cases, then why doesn't that same logic ever apply to the police? Don't try to tell me that it's just a few bad apples when you don't want to compare apples to apples. Virgil getting involved with BLM does not go against the original creator's vision because remember, they are directly involved in the reboot. Like, creators Derek T. Dingle and Dennis Cohen have publicly posted support of the movement, and if they didn't want Static involved with Black Lives Matter, then they wouldn't have let it go to print. But let me address the elephant in the room. Dwayne McDuffie can't comment on this because of his passing in 2011. However, here's a few things that you should know about McDuffie. The dude had frequent run-ins with the police and was the victim of racial profiling time and time again. After having open heart surgery, he was legitimately afraid of his searchers being pulled if he was handcuffed behind his back. As a 6'6" black man, McDuffie was constantly seen as suspicious by law enforcement. Like how he was pulled over for driving his own car and then was asked who actually owned the vehicle. McDuffie made a conscious effort to try and make himself seem smaller because his stature was seen as legitimately intimidating by some people. So if you think that McDuffie wouldn't have supported Black Lives Matter, then you either have a fundamental misunderstanding of what the movement is, or you don't know anything about him. It is completely transparent that people up in arms about Static being political know nothing about Static or Milestone Comics, and are capitalizing on hate clicks from other people that similarly know nothing. Or you can just admit that you watched the show as a kid and were too young to understand the political aspect of it. It's okay. We were all ignorant children at one point. The trick is to just not try to grow up to be an ignorant adult. People claim that media these days is too political because it's shoved down your throat. Again, just because you were too young to remember it or understand the politics in older media, that doesn't mean that it wasn't there. But also, it's not inherently bad writing if the political themes aren't subtle. For a lot of people, the injustice they deal with is a huge part of their lives. They would fucking love it if the shit they lived through wasn't just subtle. If you say that Static being political ruins the character, then I'm sorry, you're not a fan of Static. You're a fan of an idea of Static that never existed. It's not gatekeeping, it's just a fact. It's ridiculous to get upset that the media you loved as a kid doesn't live up to the version that you incorrectly remembered. And you know what? It's perfectly fine if you grow out of something, and if it doesn't hold up to those memories. It's a problem when the thing that you're suddenly upset about is well-meaning inclusivity. You grew up to be the exact kind of person that your childhood hero would be extremely disappointed in. There's a quote from the end of the Static Shock PSA on gun violence that really stood out to me. Do your part to increase the peace out there. It's not about fighting each other, it's about increasing the peace. So yeah, this video is going to get hate bombed to death, and there's going to be a lot of people making hour-long plus responses to this relatively short video, but whatever. Hopefully you took at least something away from this. And if you like this content, then hey, subscribe to my channel, I got plenty more of it. If you want to know more about Static Shock, then check out the video that I did detailing the series' history and about why it took so long for there to even be a reboot in the first place thanks to lawsuits. So anyway, I hope you learned at least a little something new, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.